today? Well, you sound wonderful. Sound wonderful. So I'm glad to see you here. My name is Donya Lindsay, and I'm the treasurer for the Metro Atlanta chapter of OGS. Also the national finance secretary for a national OGS organization. And we have quite a few, we have right now about 73 members in our chapter. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our first presenter for the African American Symposium today. That is Tiffany Atwater. Tiffany is a native of Jonesboro, Georgia. She attended South Carolina State University, homegirl, where she received her Bachelor of Arts degree in history and a master's in archival studies from Clayton State University. Currently, she serves as the head of research studies at the Atlanta University Center, Robert W. Woodruff Library's Archives Research Center. And there, she is responsible for the management and administration of the department's public services through the promotion of archival collections via course instruction, programming, curation of exhibits, and reference services. She's busy, y'all. She's busy. Tiffany is also a member of the Society of Georgia Archivists. Is it archivist or archivist? Archivist, all right. Look, you always need a little help, you know. The Academy of Certified Archivists, the Society of American Archivists, and a founding member of the Atlanta Black Archives Alliances, or ABAA. Tiffany is especially passionate about collecting the histories of America's historically Black colleges and universities and sharing the achievements and contributions of these higher education institutions. She is co-author of 2 book chapters, Loving Blackness as a first-year composition student learning outcome in the archives, and, wait a minute, let me start that again here. Loving Blackness as a first-year composition student learning outcome in the archives in the book Teaching Through the Archives, Text Collaboration and Activism. And the chapter is Improving Representation on Wikipedia, a collaboration with librarians and faculty at historically Black colleges and universities in ethnic studies in academic and research libraries. So without further ado, please welcome Tiffany Atwater.
Thank you. All right. Well, good morning. My name is Tiffany Atwater Lee. I am the head of research services, as you all just heard. And today I'm going to talk to you all, my presentation. I'll talk a little bit about my organization later, but in this presentation, it is entitled America's Historically Black Colleges and Universities, Their Legacy and Archival Record. This presentation will focus on the historical significance of America's historically Black colleges and universities, also commonly called HBCUs, by examining the vast information available through their archives and special collections. Particular emphasis will be placed on Atlanta's HBCUs, which are part of the Atlanta University Center. And this presentation is for anyone interested in researching the American Black experience, genealogical research, or understanding the structure and overall impact these higher education institutions have had on American history. So before I talk about my institutions and the archives, I always want to make sure that my audience is aware of the context of the discussion. And so by a show of hands, please raise your hand if you're aware of historically Black colleges and universities. Whoop, whoop. It's okay if you are not. That is partly why I'm here. Can anyone tell me how many HBCUs are currently in operation today? About an estimate. Yeah. So there's about 100. There's about 107 that are currently open, and there have been many closures over the years. I'm happy to give you a link to an AJC article that was done a couple years ago about 18 that we know of that have closed since the inception of these institutions. But that's great. Yes. Historically Black colleges and universities are institutions of higher education in the United States that were established with the primary mission of serving the African American community. These institutions were founded during a time when racial segregation was widespread and opportunities for higher education for Black Americans were limited. And so now that we kind of understand the context of archives, I want to talk a little bit about the learning goals for today. So I just gave you a little bit of background and context about HBCUs. We'll talk about the Atlanta History Center, the AUC Woodruff Libraries, Archives Research Center, what archives are. I'll give you some tips and tricks for using the AUC archives or academic archives for research, as a lot of these tips can go whether you're looking at the AUC Woodruff Library or you're looking at Emory University or you're looking at the Amistad Research Center in New Orleans. These tips can still help. We're going to highlight a couple of collections from our institution, our repository. So some of our institutional records, some of our special collections. We're going to practice, which is going to be my favorite part, with looking for someone in the archive. And then I'm going to give you some other archival resources, and then hopefully we'll have some times for questions and answers. So as I said, historically Black colleges and universities were founded as a way to educate African Americans. In fact, while many of these schools were established shortly after the Civil War, there were some schools that date before then. Cheyney University in Pennsylvania being one, it's actually the first university. They were founded in 1837. Wilberforce, who's in Ohio, was founded in 1856, and at that time enrolled both enslaved and free persons of color. And I thought that was amazing. I also read that the first classes had ages 7 to 70 in there. Schools were created not only to educate African Americans, but as a response to the lack of educational opportunities for Black Americans who were often excluded from predominantly white institutions, both during slavery and in its aftermath. These schools have and continue to play a pivotal role in American higher education by contributing to the advancement of knowledge, fostering diversity, and promoting the social and economic mobility to American families. While originally founded to serve Black students, I always want to make this point, HBCUs have historically been integrated spaces since their inception. As many of these schools were founded by non-Black individuals, they also served Indigenous populations such as Hampton University, which Booker T. Washington wrote about in his autobiography, Up From Slavery, as well as many of the elementary grade school classes that were in these institutions included children of the white faculty members. So this is actually a picture from Atlanta University in 1905. These are faculty members. And as you can see, it's a wide mixture. And it's also a lot of just light-skinned Black folks, honestly. In this picture are three prominent African Americans. Does anybody see those three? I know it's kind of small. There you go. You have a little known man by the name of W.E.B. Du Bois right here. He was a professor at AU. Anybody else? John Hope is not in this picture, but that's a good guess. He would have been around AU at this time, but he is not in this photograph. But we have George Towns, who is a graduate of Atlanta University. His daughter, Grace Towns Hamilton, goes on to become the first African-American woman in the Georgia State Legislature. And then over here, we have the first African-American millionaire in Georgia, Mr. Alonzo Herndon. If you're not familiar of him, he has a mansion that is still in existence today called the Herndon Home. That is a museum in the Vine City area. So I highly suggest going to research him. And his wife is in this photograph as well. She was a theater teacher at AU. But I just kind of wanted to show this is the makeup of HBCUs at this time. These institutions were often founded by individuals who then sought funding in a number of ways. And typically those ways were the same as how many of American colleges and universities still find funding. So you have your philanthropic organizations such as the American Missionary Association, which was an abolitionist organization in which the primary concern was to provide liberal Christian education among African Americans. While they funded several HBCUs, they also funded Berea College in Kentucky. So again, they were there to just help spread education in America. You also have your religious organization or your churches, such as the African Methodist Episcopal AME Church, which founded Morris Brown College here in Atlanta, as well as Allen University in Columbia, South Carolina. Little known facts, Morris Brown College is the only school in the AUC, the Atlanta University Center, that was founded by Black people. You also have the Baptist Church. So you have Morehouse College and Spelman College, both of which started out as seminaries. It was actually the Augusta Institute, and then the Atlanta Baptist Seminary from Morehouse College, and then you had the Spelman Baptist Seminary. And then, of course, the Catholic Church, because Xavier University in New Orleans was founded by Catholics. And then the federal government as well played a huge role. So the Bureau for the Relief of Freedmen and Refugees, commonly called the Freedmen's Bureau, was a government agency established during Reconstruction after the Civil War. And their primary responsibilities included assistance to formerly enslaved people. They provided assistance to formerly enslaved people, impoverished white Americans, and refugees through providing food, housing, medical care, and educational opportunities. They also worked to help allocate resources with various organizations to establish schools and educational programs, such as Howard University and Atlanta University. Many of these resources came from the land distribution, as the agency was tasked with the managing of abandoned land. So a lot of times you'll find with HBCUs that were founded by the Freedmen's Bureau, they have some type of direct tie to the Civil War in some instance, because those lands were either part of the Union Army or confiscated during the Civil War. So I always thought that was really cool. And in fact, the AUC has some of those types of lands as well. The legacy of HBCUs is more than I can count or put any type of real value on, but here are some of the ones that come to my mind. So we have our Vice President, Kamala Harris, as a director and screenplay writer, Spike Lee. So VP Harris is Howard, Spike Lee is Morehouse. We have the first woman CEO of Walgreens and former president and COO of Starbucks and Sam's Club, Ms. Rosalind Brewer, Spelman graduate. Pulitzer Prize winning author Toni Morrison, Howard graduate. W.E.B. Du Bois, graduate of Fisk. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Morehouse. Michael Strahan, NFL Hall of Famer and media personality, Texas Southern. And of course, Oprah. Does she really need anything else? Oprah, Tennessee State University. So now that we kind of understand a little bit about HBCUs and their legacy, I'm going to talk about the Atlanta University Center in particular. So the Atlanta University Center is the largest consortium of historically Black colleges and universities. And while all of these schools were founded right after the Civil War, with the earliest being 1865 Atlanta University, it wasn't until 1929 under the direction of this gentleman. My coworkers know he's my archival husband. I love this man. This is Dr. John Hope. He was the first African-American president of both Morehouse College and Atlanta University. And at one point, he served both institutions at the same time. But he had this idea to create this system to help foster the ability to survive economic times, as well as to share resources. And so he came up with the idea of this system. And so Atlanta University, Morehouse College, and Spelman College entered into this agreement in 1929, where they would essentially share resources. And so Atlanta University ceased its undergraduate degrees, solely focused on graduate level work. Morehouse would continue to educate African-American men, Spelman African-American women. And the idea was literally you could go from nursery, like baby nursery, all the way up to graduate level education without ever leaving the AUC campus. And so that was kind of part of that. Throughout its 90-some-odd-year history, it's transitioned and changed in many ways, including the incorporation of other local HBCUs, including Clark University, which was located kind of like in the Pittsburgh area, it was then called Brownsville area of Atlanta. Think about University Ave, if you're going up 75, that area. And then Morris Brown College, which was in the Grant Park area. So in the 1940s, they both physically moved over to the space that we think of now as the AUC. And then all of these schools, again, religiously affiliated, founded by churches. They had seminaries. Those seminaries, along with some other HBCUs, broke apart and created the Interdenominational Theological Center in 1958. And of course, in 1988, you had the consolidation of Atlanta University and Clark College to create Clark Atlanta University. This is important because the AUC Woodruff Library is the sole library for all of those institutions. So we serve 4 separate and distinct institutions of higher education. So that is Clark Atlanta, ITC, Morehouse, and Spelman. Morris Brown will forever be in our hearts, but because we are a separate nonprofit, they are currently not a part of that instance. So that's why Morris Brown's not on here. But of course, we do collect some of their histories as well. We are unique in that if you have to think about all of the majors, minors, personal interests of faculty, students, and staff, we have to make sure we have all of that available for our students. And so we are a very unique institution. We like to call ourselves the center of the center. It can prove challenging sometimes because, again, because they're all separate and distinct, getting students to understand that we are your library. We actually had students say, oh, I go to Clark's library. No, this is your library too. And so that is a little bit about the Atlanta University Center, Woodruff Library. Within this building, on the upper level, you can come see me. This is the Archives Research Center. We help to connect the local and community and the world to the rich historical and cultural resources at the Atlanta University Center. Our collections reflect the diverse contributions, achievements, and experiences of African Americans and the African diaspora. We have over 160 manuscript, photograph, and book collections that are accessible to the public. Our main subject focus consists of documenting African American history and culture, and we have a combination of both primary and secondary resources available that cover many disciplines and detailed topics. It's important to remember that archives are generally interdisciplinary and thus can cover a wide range of topics. So it's really hard to pinpoint what our biggest topics are, but if I had to choose, it would be education, civil rights, and of course the institutional records of the AUC. So archives, in the most basic sense of the word, are collections of materials created or gathered by a person, organization, or an institution and selected for long-term preservation as evidence of their activities, life, and lived experiences. We are often hold unique materials that are original records that are not published. They can be artifacts, artwork, oral histories, but to really make them to be archives, they're first-person accounts. With the incorporation of technology, archivists are also expanding what does that first person account look like. And so born digital materials, these are materials, I don't know about y'all, but I haven't written a letter in years. And so most people are corresponding via text, emails, all of that are part of the archival record now. And so as archivists, we are collecting that material. I like to tell students in 50 years from now, can we talk about 2020 without talking about Twitter or social media? You can't. That is a part of the archival record. So as archivists, we are also documenting that type of material as well. As archivists, we have three main responsibilities. That's to identify records and papers of enduring value, preserve those records and make them available. Now, when we identify records of enduring value, that doesn't necessarily mean monetarily. It's about usefulness and significance of records and understanding the past. This includes materials created by a person, family, organization, or government in their regular conduct of everyday affairs. So think about the records you personally keep and multiply that by every person in this room, every person in this county, every person in this state. It's a lot of records, right? And so we have to sift through all of that and find what is going to kind of tell the best account of history. So that's what we mean by identifying records. Historically, what that has been is leaving out certain people, right? Up until this point, archives, to be completely honest, were dead old white men. And so as archivists, we are understanding that there are women, there are people of color, there are indigenous people, there are immigrants. All of these stories are also part of the American experience. So we have to get those too. And that's part of that identifying records of enduring value. We preserve them. So we put them in acid-free boxes, acid-free folders. We have security, so you can't just come touching everything. That is a part of that preservation. And then, like I said, with that digital stuff, we have to make sure that that is preserved, right? Has anybody ever tried to open up an old Word document and it says you can't? That's what we're also trying to preserve, to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then most importantly, we make them available. What's the point of collecting all this stuff if nobody can use it and research it? So those are the three biggest things that archivists do. So this is kind of, looks like a busy slide, but you all should have gotten a little packet and it kind of covers a lot of this stuff that we have. So up in the top corner, I will show you a link to our research guide in case anything I said went in one ear and out the other. Everything is right here as well. We have a lot of digitized collections, which I'll go over a little bit later. So these are materials that you can look at from your own home. So yearbooks and things like that, which I'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation, that's available in Radar. That little card that I gave you shows you how to get to that website and has some examples of the type of collections you can expect to find. Our website, of course, is a great resource where you can go and find information. And then our finding aids, which are basically just inventories about what you can expect to find in collections. And then I've given you all a little how-to document on how to navigate those finding aids. This is just an example of some of the type of materials that we have in the archives. Now, I know this is very photograph heavy, but we have documents, but you know, everybody likes looking at photographs. Now, tips when using academic archives. So the first tip that I can give you is do your preliminary research. I'm going to come from an aspect if you're looking for genealogical relatives or anything like that. So come with your preliminary research. Having a context, knowing about what institution you may be looking at, a little bit about the history can be very helpful when you're talking to an archivist. I can give you an example. I'll have people come and say, my great-great-great-grandmother went to Clark Atlanta University. Well, Clark Atlanta University wasn't founded until 1988, so I doubt that they went to CAU, but let's see what other school they may have gone to. And I've literally had people argue me down. No, they went to CAU. And so again, just kind of understanding that it could have been Clark, it could have been Atlanta University will help you in your research process. Looking to see what other information is already out there, Wikipedia, podcasts, documentaries, books, oral histories, all of that secondary research, or oral histories aren't secondary, but all the other secondary research can help you again frame how do you want to enter the archival record? How do you want to approach your research? Understanding that there are gaps in archives, and those gaps are important. Like I said, there were certain populations that were left out. Just because we don't have a lot of collections documenting African-American women in the civil rights movement, we know that they were there. And so it's important that it doesn't, just because you can't find it doesn't mean it didn't exist. It's now your job to find that, or better yet, understand why you can't find it. Archivists and librarians can be your biggest resources, but we are not here to conduct your research. We are here to point you to the different ways that you can find your research. And honestly, I've never met an archivist or a reference archivist who does not love helping to kind of like connect those dots for people. As long as you come with a little bit of information for us, we can help you kind of navigate those spaces. And so I suggest creating a mind map or a document with key search terms. For example, if you're researching a family member, come prepared with their names, what their full names are, aliases, different spellings of their names. Has anybody ever seen like Du Bois' name spelled D-U space capital B or D-U lowercase? All of that. You have to come with all of that because you never know how it's going to enter into the record. Or better yet, someone like Stokely Carmichael, who changes his name later in life, understanding both of those name changes. So those are the things that you have to kind of have written down. Also, what is their formal name? A lot of African Americans had initials, right? Those initials didn't necessarily stand for anything, but during the Reconstruction era or the draft, often they were forced to give those initial names. So again, being conscious of that. And then lastly, for women, your married names, your maiden names, if they got married again. Also, one thing, and I'm gonna raise my feminist flag a little bit, but I found an organizational document that celebrated this 75-year anniversary of this organization founded by women. And it had a page dedicated to these maybe 20 women. However, they used their formal married name. So it said Mrs. John Jackson. So their names are fully erased from the organization they founded, unless you know who their husband is. So again, being even conscious of who they were married and who James Jackson may be in order to find out, is this your grandmother? Is this your relative of some sort? Understanding how you, what are the ties to the archives? So sometimes people call me and they'll say, I'm looking for this person. And I'm saying, okay, were they the staff, faculty? Did they attend AUC? No, they're from Texas. Okay. I can't really help you from there. So whenever you go to an archive, try to understand where that link can be. Now with HBCUs, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, a lot of times they can be from Texas and still ended up in Atlanta. But you have to you as a researcher have to kind of know a little bit more information for us to kind of help. So what are the ties that they have to this archive? How do you plan to research? Were they involved in clubs or organizations? If they graduated, do you know what year? Do you know what their major was? All of that information can be helped to put these puzzle pieces together. Did they have relationships with faculty members? Did they talk about a certain faculty member all the time? Up till I would say 1970, most students had some type of in-person experience with the president of the institution. In fact, in the 1800s, early 1900s, you had to write the president to get accepted to some of these institutions. So we may be able to find that information if we know that they had those type of relationships with faculty members, staff, or presidents. All of this information becomes search terms to enter the archival record. That's what I'm trying to say. So coming up with a document with this information helps us as archivists, help you as a researcher find how to navigate all our records. Also, looking at what is accessible already. So we have finding aids, which are searchable lists or inventories or collections. You can just put in those search terms to see if anything comes up. Are there things that have been digitized? Such as yearbooks and things. Can you look at that stuff at home before you come to see what else we can find? Books, like I said, secondary resources are helpful. Are there books so that you can look at captions if that can also help you piece together this? Oral histories. You'll be surprised how many people do oral histories and their other family members had no idea that they did these oral histories. And so seeing if that exists, if there's transcripts, do you have access to them? If not, how you can get access and schedule an appointment or even a consultation with your archivist to help you figure out your roadmap on how you're going to want to delve into this research. And those are some of my tips for the best way to research. And last but not least, this is the most important, come ready to put together a puzzle. Archival research is rarely straightforward and requires flexibility in order to find what you're looking for. So for some research, it may be very linear. You're looking for Thomas Jackson, we have Thomas Jackson's papers. In some instances, they may not. We may have to look in multiple places. We may have photographs that are unidentified. So are you familiar with what the person that you're looking for looked like so that you can maybe be able to identify them in an unidentified photograph? All of that is a part of that puzzle piecing, putting all those pieces together. Also, finding the connections is helpful. Luckily, when it comes to HBCUs, like I said, there tends to be an intertwined relationship where students transfer, they then become faculty members or staff members at other places, or throughout generations, a family member has gone to one or two schools. That can also be very helpful. And what you can find is that this person may have graduated from this institution, but they taught at 3 other HBCUs and came back to their alma mater. And so when we have their papers, we not only have that information, but we have those 3 other HBCUs information as well. So again, understanding the connections can help. So now let's get to some collections at the AUC in particular that may be helpful for you all to look at. So these are AUC collections, and also all of these photographs come from our collections, FYI. So about 6 years ago, the Atlanta University Center had a 2.5-year collaborative grant project that was funded by the Digital Library of Georgia to help digitize and broaden the awareness and access to unique publications and periodicals. This also includes photographs documenting the history of AUC. And so what came about of that is that all of the yearbooks, student newspapers, magazines, alumni publications are all digitized and accessible online, keyword searchable. So you're able to just search and find it. I'll show you a little bit later how I did that personally. So that's one collection. I'll show you how to gain access to that as well. We have presidential papers as well. Like I said, a lot of times students interacted directly with presidents. So you'll see correspondence. One of my favorite correspondence actually comes from John Hope, and it was in 1924, and it's a series of about 9 letters from a student from Africa trying to get here to Morehouse. And so he gets he gets it in a ship and he goes to the Caribbean. He gets robbed. He doesn't have any money, so he asks John Hope. John Hope sends him a couple of dollars, and then he gets on another boat to find work. He didn't realize that that boat was illegally shipping whiskey, and so he gets deported in Texas and goes to jail. And then he's not paid, so he writes John Hope, and John Hope tells him of a Black lawyer to contact. I don't think he contacted him. He gets on another boat to find work. And through all of this, he keeps saying, I just want to make it to Morehouse. I just want to make it to Morehouse. But me and my colleagues still don't know if he was kind of scamming him, because at one point, John Hope says, I've given you enough. If you really want to get to Morehouse, you'll get here. And this is over a span of like 3 years. So those are the type of correspondence that you can see. I don't know. We said we were going to try and do some research to find out if he ever actually made it to Morehouse or not. But it was a really interesting read. Collections. These are collections that may not be directly related to the institution, meaning that the institutions did not produce these records. These are records that came, but they are still related to us because they deal with Black history of some sort. And so, and I'm sorry, this is a young Diane Carroll, if y'all didn't know. We have the Maynard Jackson Merrill Administrative Records. Hopefully many of you all know that he was the first African-American mayor of a major Southern city, that being Atlanta. He served 3 terms. He was integral in getting us the expansion of the airport, MARTA, and the '96 Olympics. He's also a Morehouse man, and his mother and aunts were all Spelman women. And so this collection, as you can see, are 273 linear feet. I just want to give you all representation. This is 1/2 linear foot. So that's how large his collection is. And it's available for research. And it has a lot of really cool things in there as well, including speeches. One of the big topics that we often see people interact with is during his tenure, the Atlanta Missing and Murdered event happened in Atlanta. And so that is kind of one of the really interesting parts, because a lot of people don't know that the mayor's office actually paid for the funerals of many of those victims. And so you'll see letters written to family members. Not only did they pay for those funerals, they would also clothe other family members in order to attend the funerals. So you can see that. And then there's also correspondence from literally around the world of people pouring in and saying that their hearts are with the victims and families of Atlanta. We also have the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Jr. collection. This collection documents Dr. King's life from around the 1950s, when he first gets to Alabama at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, all the way until his death. These materials were actually in the basement of Coretta Scott King's home, and we're going to be, after her death, we're going to be auctioned off piece by piece. Prominent Atlanteans got together, including Ambassador Andrew Young, then Mayor Shirley Franklin, and they were able to raise funds, $32 million, to purchase this collection. And they gifted it back to his alma mater, Morehouse College. And so we have those materials. Part of those materials also include 1,200 of his personal books. And the cool thing about his books is that you'll see that Dr. King was reading anything and everything. So you have stuff about environmental problems in the 1960s. You have encyclopedias. You have history books, of course, about different organizations. And then his mentors' books as well. And some of the books have marginalia, so you can really see what he was thinking as he was reading. And in some instances, we even found documents in between pages. So again, you can see maybe what inspired writings of certain writings he may have had. He also has a lot of correspondence. So we'll get people saying, my grandmother wrote to Dr. King, do you have this? And we do. And so that is another way to find. I always laugh that one of the letters that we found was a woman complaining about how bad the food was at an SCLC event. And so I'm like, if your grandmother always tell you, I wrote to Dr. King, you find out she was just complaining about the mashed potatoes, but that's kind of the fun thing about looking at archival records. All of this collection is digitized, so you have to come into the archives and look on the computer in order to see all these materials. But ever so often, we have special viewings where we bring the originals out for people to look. So just follow us on our social medias or on our website to see when those events. We just had one Monday for King Day where we brought out materials from his collection so you could get an up close and personal view of Dr. King's archival record. We also have the Atlanta Urban League papers. So Atlanta Urban League was established in 1920 as a formal organization, vehicle for addressing the social and economic problems that African Americans endured in the cities. Conditions included poor housing and health services, as well as inadequate employment. You remember that man, George Towns, that I mentioned in the first picture? This is his daughter. She was an executive director of Atlanta Urban League before she went on to join the state legislature. And we also have her papers as well. This is a really good collection because if you are a native Atlantean, you can really see the work that they did and perhaps a lot of the grassroots effort activism that maybe you or your family members participated in. We also have the Johnson Publishing Company clipping files. Yes, this is the ebony and jet stuff. These are actually the subject files that the editors and journalists of that institution compiled in order to write their material. So they come from a lot of different things. So what I love about this collection is that you can see often how mainstream press and Black publications wrote about the same events. And sometimes you can see how starkly different that can be and what does that mean to history and how we remember those events or those people. You can also find some real cool gems. So we did an exhibit with Coca-Cola a couple of years ago to document the anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize lunch that Coca-Cola held on behalf of Dr. King. It was the first integrated dinner in Atlanta. And he was looking in this and he found a transcript from Coretta Scott King in an interview. And apparently she said that she didn't like Dr. King when she first met him. She thought he was, in her words, she thought he was short and arrogant. And so I thought that was really funny. So again, these documents allow you to see the human a lot of times in these people that we often kind of just think that they were always about business, I guess. The Neighborhood Union collection, this collection, so you remember my archival husband, John Hope. This is his wife, Virginia Burns Hope. She actually started the first social welfare organization for African-American women in the South, the Neighborhood Union. Now, these women were doing things such as free kindergartens, nurseries, really working to help the conditions of the Atlanta University Center area. At this time, that area was, so you had these prestigious institutions, and then you had what they call Beaverslide slums, literally right there. And so these were areas that had no floors, there were mud floors, there was a lot of crime, just wasn't a great place. And so they realized you can't have this Black excellence of education up here, and then the people who are working and were working to strive for this race over here struggling. And so their organization worked a lot with that. I wish I would have put up my favorite picture. There's a picture with these women in 1920s, and they all are wearing furs in a picture. And I love that picture because you're in Atlanta. It's never hot enough to wear furs. But I love that picture because, again, these were affluent Black women. But again, they were still servicing the communities that they love dearly. The Southern Education Foundation records. Remember, I talked about a lot of those philanthropic organizations. These were some. However, they focus mainly on rural education. So some of you all may have heard of Jeans teachers before or Jeans schools. These were those sometimes one-room schools in these rural areas that were teaching the African-American community. In this collection, the reason why I brought this up is because a lot of times they got their teachers from, you guessed it, HBCUs. And so in this collection, there are applications from the 1920s, the 1930s, and the 1940s that have the list of the name, what institution they went to, and just it's a handwritten application to be a Jeans teacher. And in even some instances, you have the reports that these teachers gave of what they were able to accomplish in these rural schools. So one of them was like they were able to create a garden for the community. And so again, thinking about education more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also nutrition. How do you garden? How do you sew? Those type of things. All of these teachers were doing that. But these applications can also be a gateway if you know that someone was a teacher. You can even see maybe what school that they taught at or what they were able to accomplish in that time. But this is also a very large collection. And there are also some photographs too, because this went on until I think maybe the 60s, late 60s or 70s. So now let's try it out. So, full disclosure, I decided to use my own family members for this task. I hope that they are okay with this because they are in the audience. I'm looking for information about 2 family members who went to Morehouse College and Spelman College. And so let's go back and think about those tips. I know I'm going to create a mind map, so I made one. I know their names. I have an idea of what years they attended. And the first place, because I attended this presentation, I know AUC has all their yearbooks digitized. So I'm going to look there. So I have a question first. Would you all like me to show you kind of like what I was able to find and then show you how I found it? Or do you want to go through the process? The process. All right. So give me 1 second. All right. Here's that website, the Atlanta University Center, Woodruff Library's website. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to archives and collections. I like to go to digital exhibits because remember, what did I call that thing that we were looking at? It's called Our Story, Photographs and Publications. So when you go there, it takes you right here. Yes. No, you can do this from home. This is open anywhere you're at. So I apologize because my screen is small. If you're on a larger screen, this won't kind of come in like that. But right here, you have a list of all the institutions that are at the AUC. So I'm going to click Spelman College. And if you scroll down, you see course catalogs, Messenger, Campus Mirror, all of these things. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about course catalogs. Course catalogs are great resources because they not only tell you what courses, but in earlier years, they would list every student and where they came from. So if you're looking for someone named Mary Jackson in 1920, I imagine there's a lot of Mary Jacksons. But if you know that she was from Cordelia, Georgia, you'll see that on that line. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. So that can help you. Yes. It'll be under CAU because they merged at one point. So if I go back, that's a great question. When I go back, I'm going to look under Clark Atlanta, and you see Atlanta University Bulletins, Clark College Catalog. So we've grouped them together, but they're still separate as you're searching. You're welcome. So go to Spelman College. Course catalogs also would tell you maybe when certain buildings were built. So if you know that a family member worked on a building or was in this building, you're able to find that information. Catalogs can be great resources, especially if names are misspelled or anything like that. We had a archivist who's working on an oral history, and this Spelman woman said she went to high school at Spelman because these schools often have elementary and high schools and then your college preparatory classes. And she couldn't find her. And it was because the person who took her oral history listed her name wrong. But because she was able to find what year she went, she talked about what classes she went to. And then I think she said in the oral history, the woman referred to herself in third person at one point. She was able to put all of that together and find her in the catalog record. So catalogs are great resources. But I'm going to scroll down to the reflection, which is the yearbooks. So the yearbooks will come up. So this is the collection. You can then press date and it'll put it in ascending order. So you see the oldest one that we have is 1951. If you come over here to what we call the hamburger, you can also suss out, you can also suss out by decade what you want to look. I apologize, hold on 1 second. There we go. By decade, what you want to search. Now you can only search one decade at a time, just FYI. And then when you click here, this searches directly where you're looking for. So I'm going to put in who I'm looking for. And I have 4 hits come up. I'm going to click on this one because all of this is keyword searchable. Now, as it's load, it's going to remember what my search was, and it's going to take me to where that name appears. Now, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with Boolean searches. So if you put things in quotations, it finds everything that's in quotations. If you don't put it in quotations, it's just going to look for the same sequencing of that word. So here, this is not who I'm looking for. So I'm going to go back to the search, and I'm going to put in, and there she is, right here. And again, it listed the name or where she's from. So I know this is who I'm looking for. I can then go back and look to see where else she appears. So I'm only in yearbooks. So I'm curious now, does she appear anywhere else in the AUC period? Because the AUC worked a lot together. So I'm just going to go back up here since I was able to find that one photograph, and I'm going to put in the same thing. I'm going to do it in quotations because it's probably looking for all first names. There we go. You see how it greatly reduced it when I use quotations? So I'm going to look, let's see. I'm interested in this issue. Nope, I'm interested right here. 1976. So Spelman Messenger was an alumni magazine. Remember I talked about alumni magazines. Alumni magazines are also great places to look because this is how the school kept up with what their alumni were doing. So you'll find out about marriages, births, promotions, anything that was happening. And right here, you see that she was the class of 72, and this is in 1976, and they're following up on what she's doing with her life right now at that point in time. So this is another way that you can find people within the archival record. If I go back, I want to look to see what was in this 1981 version. And it's going to come up again. And this goes for all alumni magazines, because even if people went to another HBCU institution to get a degree, sometimes they would even put that in there as well. So again, you see how here it was just looking up the first name. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to put on there she appears. But what do you see that's changed? The married name. So again, as you're putting these puzzles together, you can see what has happened in a couple of years, right? So that's an example of what I was able to do. But then let's say this, I know she met my uncle also here, right? So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I could go through the yearbooks or I can just search all together. So I'm going to search. It comes up. Now this is where it gets a little interesting. I'm going to look right here. Remember we talked about those catalogs and how they can also, again, show you who attended, so you can at least see when they were present at the institution. I'm going to open a new tab just to speed things up just a little bit. So this is that catalog. So that's not who I'm looking for. So I'm going to go back over here, put in the name, and there he is right there. You all see that? Oops. So that's what, okay, so he was here, and I think this is 1972. So now I'm going to look in that yearbook. And there he is. But the other cool thing is that, what's this 2004? So I'm going to look here at this 2004 yearbook and see why is he in the 2004 yearbook too? And again, it's just looking up the first name. It's my cousin, right? Talk about that lineage. So then again, this is how you can kind of just search and connect those dots. So here we go. So here we go. These are all the things I was able to find. I also was able to find that she was a part of the political science club as well. That was in the yearbook. There's my uncle and everything I was able to find, and my little family tree, right? So other archival resources that you can use. The Atlanta Black Archives Alliance, or ABBA, was formed in 2017 by a group of Atlanta area archivists, and Tamika is a member as well. And we are invested in sharing our city's unique and valuable resources on Black history and culture to as wide an audience as possible. Our mission is to enhance the visibility of Atlanta's African-American archival collections in order to educate and empower diverse communities. So we used to meet regularly, and we all represented different organizations, and we would learn about each other's collections, again, to help us help you connect the dots. So if you're looking for Grace Towns Hamilton and materials related to her, I can say, I know for a fact Atlanta History Center also has materials related to her. You should go over there as well and look. If you're looking for Harper Aiken Rucker family, was a prominent family here in Atlanta, we have materials at the AUC. I think Emory has materials, and Atlanta History Center. So again, we're here to help you as long as you kind of help us along that way. The HBC Library Alliance, which is a digital platform that encompasses about maybe 9 or 10 HBCUs. They're documenting materials from their archives, founding materials, all types of stuff on this platform as well. This is all, again, free and accessible to anybody. They recently received a grant. It's a 4-year grant for $6 million in collaboration with Harvard University. It's called the HBC Digital Trust, and they will be building this out to include even more HBCUs. So we'll be working to help HBCUs, especially those smaller ones, get their stuff accessible and digitized and available to the public. Other resources, I think one of my colleagues will be talking later today about the Digital Library of Georgia. That's a great online resource you can go to find materials. Georgia Historic Newspapers, Library of Congress, the National Archives, New York Public Library, as well as some of the big ones, the Arthur Schomburg Research Center in New York. They are, if you're looking for Black history, I really feel like they're going to have a lot of it. Also, you'll have the Homicide Research Library in New Orleans is a great place to find materials. And the Avery Center in Charleston. All of these have online platforms as well. So you can look to see, again, what is accessible to you. And then, of course, the Moreland Spring Guard at Howard University. Those are other great places for you all to visit and look. And now I am ready to take any questions. I thank you all for listening. If I can have you all to just use your phone to take this quick survey to just let me know how this presentation was, and I'm here to answer any questions you all may have. Yes.
Back to the yearbook stuff.
So it depends on the institution. So I think for Clark College, we have the oldest one we have is 1926. From Morehouse College, the oldest we have, I think, is 1923, and it's really cool because it actually has Howard Thurman in that yearbook. Spelman has their own archive, but we work heavily along with their archivists, and so I think the oldest one they have is 1951. Atlanta University, we don't have any yearbooks. Again, remember they changed to graduate education in 1929, so I don't think they really did yearbooks. And Morris Brown, the oldest we have, I think, is 1927. Now, I will keep in mind that with yearbooks, and this is across academic institutions, around the world wars, so in the 1940s, a lot of schools would stop any publications. And so you'll see in some yearbooks, they'll have a thing that says, to support the war effort, we will not be printing documents. And so sometimes there's a gap between 1940 and 1946 during the war. Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my mental research.
Yes.
Would you city, would you look at alumni magazines or?
I would go to the catalog first. So we can do this, we can do it together if you want. So I'll go to the catalog. I'm in Morris Brown. Do you know the person's name?
Yes.
How do you spell it?
CHAN.
What year did they go? All right, let's look at this 1908 one. Were they a Reverend? No, that's the wrong Jones. So let's do this again. CHAN. I'm not seeing it in 1908, but again, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But as you can see here, and you said it could, what was the first name? Could be? Okay. So we can also search up here. So again, it'll encompass a lot of different things. And so then you can kind of break down what you're looking for. In 1910. And we don't see anything there. So it would just be, again, picking and choosing and trying to find it that way.
I just have to know, I did see the newsletter.
They have some of the newsletters, but I don't know for Morris Brown if we have them that old. You're welcome. Yes.
Archives anywhere and what has happened? Transcript.
So for transcripts, typically archives, we don't really keep transcripts because that is personal records. And you're not allowed to, ideally for grades, you're not supposed to show someone's grades until after they're deceased. And so we don't really show that. So even when we come across faculty members that have grade books, we restrict those because we don't know if that person is deceased. But yeah, most of them are gone. But then sometimes the registrar's office at the institution may have it. They may not, and I don't know what they did with them. We don't really keep any of those. But I will say, for instance, that Spelman's very meticulous. So I think that they do have a lot of those types of transcripts. Again, though, you may be able to find it if you know this person may have applied to somewhere and asked for a letter of recommendation, right? And they could have sent that packet to a faculty member. So sometimes there's those ways. As far as Morris Brown, we don't know. We try at the AUC to collect what we can. In fact, we've had multiple excursions where we have had to go into those abandoned buildings and try and find and salvage whatever we could find. Unfortunately, for some of those buildings, it literally looks like someone just turned off the lights and walked out. And it's been like that for 20 something years. So we're trying to collect them, but unfortunately that's what happens sometimes. And especially with HBCUs, I don't know if you are familiar with St. Paul University was an HBCU. It closed in 2013. When they closed, they literally put out all of their materials on the side of the road. Someone came along, found it, and created an archive with it. But sometimes that happens. And so that's why we're really working hard to try to piece together. But that's sometimes those gaps in that history. A couple of things, because we have some churches. With the AME church, it just depends on which church in particular you're referencing. I think I saw her hand first. Oh, yes, sorry. Oh, okay. Yes, I can make it a little bit bigger too. The link. I can send a link to the creators of the event. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can do it this way. Did anyone have any other questions? Yes.
Two things. Do you have, I mean, you answered Paula's question about the AME records and all, but do you all have digital copies of records from the AME Publishing House out in Nashville?
Not that I know of.
Okay, because that's a repository and they do have records, old records there. The other thing, I was at AU Center once and I was looking at the Methodist records. So they do have books that may have all of the minutes from the conferences.
Yes.
AME Church.
Yes.
So that's another source. This is awesome. I'm so excited to be hear this because Johnson, the slide that you did with the Johnson Publishing Company, I remember I went to Xavier, so it wasn't considered an HBCU, but it was an HBCU, but it's because it was Catholic. But one of the things that we used to do is, and I grew up in New Orleans, so we would get the Jet and the Ebony magazines, and anyone who would have a wedding, they didn't have to go to an HBCU or a Black university. If they wanted to, they could send their wedding pictures in the story or whatever. So it doesn't mean that if you're not in this, it could still be in the Johnson Publishing archives.
Yes.
If your family member had a big social event. And of course, I'm old enough to remember when the furs and the diamonds and the silver and the patterns, the marriage patterns and things like that were big things. So they wanted to show that off. And where else could they show it off? But in Johnson Publishing Company, Ebony and Jet.
Yes.
Last thing, we thought we would keep the Jet magazines forever. And then they started fraying and all. So I'm just happy to see that they're somewhere digitally.
So the Johnson Publishing won't be the actual Ebony and Jets. However, all of the Jet magazines and Ebony magazines are available on Google. They digitized all of them. Now, there are some gaps, and so sometimes you may be able to go find, there was a 1960-ish Ebony one, and the front cover is Our Negro Girls Getting Prettier. That one's not digitized, but our archive has an actual copy of it. So sometimes you can find it that, but you can find those on Google. Yes. So we have some Black newspapers, but a lot of the Black newspapers you're going to find digitized on databases that you can either access through your public library, the Georgia Archives, or even if you made an appointment to the Archives Research Center, and then we're looking at some archival materials, we could also point you to African American newspapers. Another great thing is, and this was a collection that I didn't show, but we have the Trezvon Anderson papers. He was a journalist and he wrote for the Pittsburgh Courier, because again, a lot of these Black newspapers weren't necessarily in Atlanta or things like that, but we have articles that he wrote. So you may be able to find it that way as well. The Atlanta Inquirer and the Atlanta Daily World are the two big Black publications or newspapers in Atlanta. The Black Daily World are digitized and they do have a database you can go to look at. Yes, ma'am. Some of the materials are digitized, but because it's so large, it's not all digitized. So I would go to Radar and look. We do have a good chunk that are digitized. And if you're interested in anything, you can always make an appointment to come look at things in particular. Sure. So what we have Okay, so what we did was we sent out surveys to all the HBCUs, and so if they responded, and so we're actually, that project started this year, and so we have job posting for the archivist and the digital tech. So it really depends on if that institution responds to us, but we are again actively trying to engage with these. So we hope that Wilberforce will be one of those institutions. It's 4 years. Yes. So actually, we just acquired Morehouse's archives. So we are the full custodian. They have a lead archivist, Miss Aletha Moore Carter, and she is diligently working to make those as accessible as possible. That archive takes up this entire room. So as you can see, it takes a long time. So she has an archival assistant, and it may take some years, but we're trying our hardest to get things accessible as much as we can. But yes, Morehouse's archives are now at the AUC Woodruff Library. Yes. The Schomburg Center, Schomburg, and his name was Author Schomburg. He was Afro-Caribbean, so it's actually authors like Arturo, but people say Author Schomburg. And it's the Schomburg Center, and it's in New York. Also, we have a collection of one of his contemporaries, Henry P. Slaughter, that you can also find. And actually, Henry P. Slaughter gave Author Schomburg's eulogy. So, but the Schomburg Center is a great place to go for materials relating to Black culture. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am. So Citizens Trust Bank, I believe Auburn Avenue has it. So the gentleman, Derek Mosley, who's coming on after me, I think because they're actually in the same building, I think his archive is in the same building, he should be able to talk about Citizens Trust Bank. So we are open Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. You just have to either call or email us to make an appointment. We can walk you through that. Fridays is by appointment only, and we're open from 1 to 5. And that's it. Just call and make an appointment. And so that if that little booklet, if you all got it, our contact information's behind it. May I see it? Our contact information should be right here on the last page on the bottom. You have our email address and the phone number. How to make an appointment. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
So when we online, all we could find was slaves. Are there other sources?
There probably are, because it's not with the AUC. I'm not best, but Miss Tamika, Tamika, you present today as well. She's really good at, and she's here at the Georgia Archive. So it may be that you find materials there. And again, it's those puzzle pieces. If you can only find enslaved records, trying to map out our family history and then find names to then work backwards. Okay. Last question. I'm sorry. She was looking for information about her mother and her grandmother, and she knows that they lived on a plantation. But when she looked it up, she could only find records of enslaved people on that, and so she was curious on how do you navigate that. So my advice was to talk to Miss Tamika right next to you, but also it may be that you have to work backwards. So finding out family names and then working to see if you can find those enslaved ancestors first and then work up to the present. All right. Thank you all so much.